Why this black revolutionary was feared by the world's superpowers. The year was 1791, and the world was a powder keg. Empires stretched their hands across continents, and the Atlantic Ocean was a highway of human misery. Ships carried enslaved Africans across the waves, bound in chains, destined for lives of unimaginable suffering in the sugar plantations of the Caribbean. It was a time when European powers, France, Britain, and Spain, fought over colonies, wealth, and power. But in one tiny corner of the world, a spark was about to ignite a fire that would shake these empires to their core. That spark was Haiti, and at the heart of it stood one man, a black revolutionary whose name would soon be whispered in fear in the halls of the world's most powerful nations. His name was Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint was born into enslavement on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, a land of brutal sugar plantations. But unlike most, Toussaint was educated. He learned to read, write, and even mastered the art of diplomacy. These skills would prove to be his most dangerous weapons. In 1791, as the ideals of the French Revolution spread, liberty, equality, fraternity, enslaved Africans in Saint-Domingue saw a chance for their own freedom. A massive uprising erupted and the plantations burned. Toussaint, a man who had once been a servant, now emerged as a leader. But he was not just any leader. He was a strategist, a negotiator, and a visionary. Toussaint led the rebels with an iron will, but he was also a master of diplomacy. He played the European powers against each other, promising support to the French while secretly negotiating with the British and Spanish. He knew that the world's superpowers saw Saint-Domingue as a jewel, and he was determined to use their greed against them. Under his leadership, the Black Revolutionaries won victory after victory. French generals who once scoffed at the idea of a black army now trembled at the mention of Toussaint's name. The world watched in shock as the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue defeated some of Europe's finest armies. But for Toussaint, victory on the battlefield was just the beginning. He dreamed of a free and prosperous nation, one where black people could live as equals, not as slaves. His dream was a direct threat to the world's superpowers, whose economies were built on the backs of enslaved people. And so, as the Black Revolution in Saint-Domingue gained strength, the world's empires began to fear one man above all others. Toussaint Louverture, the Black Revolutionary who dared to challenge the world. Toussaint Louverture's rise was no accident. It was the result of brilliance, courage, and relentless determination. As the rebellion in Saint-Domingue raged on, Toussaint transformed from a humble leader of a band of rebels into the supreme commander of an army. But his genius was not just in warfare. It was in diplomacy. Toussaint knew that his enemies were not just the French, but the Spanish and the British, who saw the chaos in Saint-Domingue as an opportunity to seize the island. He played them all against each other. With the French, he promised loyalty in exchange for the abolition of slavery, a promise they reluctantly accepted. With the Spanish, he negotiated alliances, using their fear of French expansion to his advantage. And with the British, he waged a brutal guerrilla war, forcing them to abandon their invasion. Under his leadership, the Black Army grew stronger. Former slaves became disciplined soldiers. Fields that had once grown sugar now produced food for the army. And the cities of Saint-Domingue became fortresses, defended by men and women who had known the horrors of enslavement and now fought for freedom. But Toussaint's vision went beyond the battlefield. He saw the future of Saint-Domingue not as a colony, but as an independent nation, a land of free men, black and white, living together as equals. He issued decrees protecting property, inviting white planters to return and rebuild the economy, but under his terms. For the world's superpowers, this was a nightmare. A black man ruling over a colony of free black men and women was an idea that terrified them. It threatened their empires, their economies, and their sense of superiority. In 1701, Toussaint declared a new constitution for Saint-Domingue. It abolished slavery forever, declared him governor for life, and established equality for all citizens. The world's empires watched in horror, but they were not done with Toussaint. In Paris, the newly crowned Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte saw the rise of the Black Revolutionary as an affront to his own dreams of empire. He swore to crush Toussaint Louverture and reclaim Saint-Domingue for France. And so, the most powerful man in Europe set his sights on the man who had become the world's most feared Black Revolutionary. Napoleon Bonaparte was not a man who tolerated defiance. To him, the idea of a black man ruling a French colony was an insult. He was the Emperor of France, the master of Europe, and he saw Saint-Domingue as a jewel, one that he was determined to reclaim. In 1702, Napoleon sent a massive expeditionary force to Saint-Domingue. Tens of thousands of French troops, led by his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc, landed on the island. Their mission was clear: crush the rebellion, restore French control, and capture Toussaint Louverture. But Toussaint was not a man who surrendered easily. He knew that the French were coming, and he prepared his forces for a brutal war. He ordered his commanders to burn the fields, poison the wells, and wage a relentless guerrilla campaign. The lush sugar plantations that had once been the source of the island's wealth now became a wasteland. The French troops, confident in their European discipline and firepower, soon found themselves bogged down in a nightmarish conflict. The tropical heat sapped their strength. Mosquitoes carrying yellow fever decimated their ranks, and everywhere they went, they were harassed by black fighters who struck without warning and vanished into the jungles. But Napoleon's army was vast, and despite the heroism of Toussaint's forces, the French pushed forward. City after city fell. Toussaint's closest allies were captured or killed. And finally, faced with overwhelming odds, Toussaint decided to negotiate. He met with General Leclerc, who promised that if Toussaint surrendered, he would be allowed to retire in peace. Toussaint agreed, laying down his arms. But it was a trap. On June 7, 1802, Toussaint Louverture was arrested. French soldiers dragged him from his home in the night, and he was placed in chains. Napoleon's orders were clear. This black revolutionary was too dangerous to be left free. They transported him across the Atlantic, far from the sunlit fields of Saint-Domingue, to a cold, damp prison cell in the mountains of France, the Fort de Joux. Here, the man who had once been the most feared revolutionary in the world was left to die. But even as Toussaint languished in his cell, his legacy lived on. His name became a symbol of defiance. And on the island he had fought for, the fire of revolution refused to die. For while Napoleon had defeated Toussaint, he had not defeated his dream. Toussaint Louverture was gone, but his dream lived on. The French believed they had crushed the rebellion, but they were wrong. The spirit of freedom Toussaint had ignited could not be extinguished so easily. Back in Saint-Domingue, Toussaint's most loyal generals, men like Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe, picked up the torch. They were fierce, relentless, and they had learned from Toussaint's triumphs and mistakes. And unlike Toussaint, they were not interested in negotiating with the French. They wanted independence, complete and absolute. Dessalines was a man of iron. He had once been a slave, but now he was a warrior, a man who had watched his people suffer under the French whip, who had fought alongside Toussaint, and who was willing to burn the island to the ground rather than see it fall back into French hands. The French soon realized their victory was an illusion. Yellow fever continued to decimate their troops, and the guerrilla war became even more brutal. Dessalines and Christophe unleashed a wave of terror on the French, striking without mercy, but even as the fighting raged, the French refused to surrender. Napoleon sent reinforcements, determined to reclaim Saint-Domingue. But the French soldiers who arrived found a nightmare, a land scorched, a people who fought with the fury of the desperate, and a disease that killed without warning. In 1703, Dessalines declared war not just on the French army, but on French rule itself. His men marched under a new flag, one that had torn away the white section of the French tricolor, leaving only the blue and red. It was a symbol of the nation they were about to create. On November 18, 1703, at the Battle of Vertières, Dessalines led the final assault. The French lines crumbled, and their generals, broken and demoralized, were forced to surrender. On January 1, 1804, Dessalines declared the independence of Haiti. It was the first black republic in the world, a nation born in fire and blood, a symbol of freedom that terrified the world's empires. But the cost of that freedom was immense. Cities lay in ruins, fields were scorched, and the people who had won their freedom had done so at a terrible price. And yet, they were free. Free because one man had dared to dream, and because others were willing to die for that dream. Haiti was free, but freedom was not peace. The land that had been baptized in blood now faced the harsh reality of survival. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the iron-willed general who had led the final assault against the French, now became the leader of the world's first black republic. But the scars of war were everywhere. Cities lay in ruins. Plantations, once the lifeblood of the island's economy, were charred wastelands. The people who had fought for freedom now struggled to rebuild. Dessalines was a man who knew no fear, but he also knew that the world's superpowers would never forgive Haiti for its rebellion. France, Britain, and Spain viewed the new nation with hatred and fear. The United States, where slavery remained the law of the land, refused to even recognize Haiti's independence. But Dessalines was undeterred. He declared himself Emperor of Haiti, determined to forge a strong, independent nation. He redistributed land to the former slaves, ensuring that the people who had fought for freedom now had a share in the land they had once toiled upon. Yet his rule was brutal. Determined to secure Haiti's freedom, he launched a campaign of terror against the remaining French on the island. Thousands were killed, and his harsh measures earned him enemies even among his own people. But Dessalines was not just a tyrant, he was a visionary. He ordered the rebuilding of the nation's cities, promoted agriculture, and sought to establish trade with other nations. He knew that for Haiti to survive, it needed to be strong. But the world was against him. France, humiliated by its defeat, demanded massive reparations as the price of recognizing Haiti's independence, a debt that would cripple the young nation for generations. And within Haiti, old divisions festered. The generals who had fought alongside Dessalines grew resentful of his absolute power. Plots were whispered in the shadows, and his enemies bided their time. On October 17, 1806, Dessalines was ambushed and assassinated by his own officers. The man who had declared Haiti's independence, who had led his people to freedom, now lay dead in the dust, a victim of the very struggle he had fought to win. But even in death, Dessalines left a legacy. Haiti remained free. The world's superpowers continued to despise it, but they could not conquer it. It was a nation born of blood and fire, a symbol of defiance that refused to die. Haiti survived, but the world never forgot the fear it inspired. The story of a black republic born in the flames of rebellion echoed through the centuries, a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless struggle for freedom. To the world's superpowers, Haiti was a warning, a reminder that the oppressed could rise, fight, and win. But for those who remember, Haiti is more than just a story of blood and fire. It is a story of a dream of freedom, of equality, of a world where the chains of oppression can be shattered by those who dare to believe in a better future. And in the spirit of Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and the countless men and women who fought for freedom, that dream lives on. If you've been moved by this story, if you've felt the fire of their courage, Don't let their memory fade. Keep the legacy alive. Share this story. Let the world know the truth. This is Uncle Luke Tells History. If you love these stories, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. More incredible stories are coming your way. See you in the next one.